Spooky nerds, and welcome to Talking Strange, a paranormal pop culture show with the Den of Geek network, where we discuss the entertainment of the unexplained. Coming at you from Brooklyn, New York, which you might hear in the background, I am your host, Aaron Sagers, a journalist, author, researcher of all things weird. Currently, I appear on the Travel Channel and Discovery Plus show Paranormal Caught on Camera. And I'm very pleased to bring this guest in. This gentleman is one of those people that I have been watching him in cinema and really appreciating his performance as an actor. And then there was just such delight when I learned that he is one of us. He's a nerd. He's a horror nerd. And just when I've been watching the promos for his comic book, which we're going to be talking about, he's definitely leaning into it. Is definitely an honest nerd. He's one of us. He's stunned us. He's disturbed us. He's delighted us in films like The Dark Knight, most recently Dune. He has had his own superhero moments in both Ant-Man and in the Suicide Squad. And yes, I would say in both those roles, he got to be a superhero. He even said it in the Suicide Squad. He's also the creator and writer of the Dark Horse comic horror comedy Count Crowley, and that is the reluctant Midnight Monster Hunter, who then becomes the amateur Midnight Monster Hunter in the new series that's coming along, with art by Lucas Kettner. In Count Crowley, aspiring reporter and alcoholic Jerri Bartman is demoted. It's a bad scene. She's demoted to hosting the nightly creature feature at her small town TV station, but she quickly learns there's more to being a local horror host than just introducing bad B movies. And in her first night in costume as Count Crowley, stepping in for her missing predecessor, she comes face to face with a living, breathing werewolf. Jerri is coming back. She's coming back March 23rd with Count Crowley, Amateur Midnight Monster Hunter, and Volume 1 is available now. So with all of that said, let me bring in the creator, the writer of Count Crowley, Mr. David Dastmalchian. And he is right here. David.
Hey.
Hi.
Man. Thank you, Aaron. That was such an awesome introduction. I'm very humbled and very grateful to be here. And hello to all of the monster kids tuning in right now.
And thank you so much for being here. I really do. It's such a sincere statement. Seeing you in shows like The Flash, seeing you pop up in the genre fare that I love as a nerd, obviously The Dark Knight, and then learning about this whole other side of you, I was like, oh my God, like there is just this glee moment of seeing someone out there doing so well, and knowing that they're a true blue nerd. So I appreciate that about you.
Thank you. Well, the same right back at you. Obviously, your passion for this stuff goes far beyond just it's not your job. It's not just it's not just thing you do to pay the bills. It's like, this is the stuff you love. And I think that, to have a longevity in the work, obviously you have to have a passion for it, but I'm just so grateful that, something that has been so meaningful and important to me for so long, which when I was younger and wasting my lawn mowing money on all of that stuff, or breaking the religious rules of my household to watch Crematia's Friday Nightmare, or all the things that I did that were that were breaking the rules, or maybe considered a waste of time, have proven for me to be, not just a worthy pursuit in the sense that I get to do this stuff for a living, but it's, whether I was getting to be a full-time actor and writer or not, I just know how much, of the big and exciting and interesting and scary things that we think about in our lives, we get to wrestle with in the safety of the pages of horror comics, or sitting on our couch or in a theater getting to watch horror cinema and genre cinema in general. It doesn't just have to be horror, but I do love science fiction, obviously, stuff beyond the realm of the supernatural, and I'm just so grateful to do it and to get to have conversations like the one we're going to have today. it's really great. I'm so glad that there's people out there that are still thirsty and hungry for this stuff and that want to get into these conversations and enjoy this kind of content.
Well, and you nailed it. I think there's something about, obviously, I consider myself very fortunate to be able to do this stuff as a job. But yeah, I think there is this desire almost to go back in time and talk to 10-year-old me and say, hey, little Aaron with less facial hair, all this stuff that you're into right now, and maybe some people think it's weird, just hang in there, because you're on the right path. I wouldn't do that because that would be, we know, horrible for the space-time continuum. It's bad news, but I would like
Yeah,
to do that. You were born, if my research is correct, you were born in Allentown, PA, a place where I also ended up living and working as a newspaper editor, and then you were raised in Kansas. What is
yes.
about these blue collar religious Midwest areas that makes them a good spot for little monster lovers, or maybe for monsters themselves?
There's so many. I mean, this is a huge conversation. I'm fascinated with it. I'm just as you asked me that, I'm looking at this book that I got. I love these old like paranoid books of the 80s. I collect them, like Saturday Morning
Yeah.
Mind Control, the Phil Phillips books about like, we were living in these communities that were, out of and who there you can analyze this 6 ways from Sunday, but like why they were built up in such a culture of fear. Was it the alienation that comes about with segregation, which was a big part of the way a lot of
Mm.
these communities were developed? Is it the alienation that comes about with a lot of the religious segregation that was there's the racial, the religious, the nationalist kind of segregation that goes along with the way a lot of the communities were kind of built in which many of us were raised. There's also the notion that life is so complicated, and issues that cover the gambit of the human experience can be so nullifyingly terrifying, from issues related to family and family dynamics, to financial insecurities, especially when you're living in a country that the dollar is god. And I being raised as you were in the 80s, under a Reaganomics, like we're going for the lionizing of powerful white rich men was like the paradigm. So we lived in these communities where religion, which as we know can be used for so much good, can also be used, unfortunately, for so much not good, especially with young minds. So there's tons of kind of archaic thinking that is shoved into young people's minds, and then you're in the suburbs. At least for me, I was on the outside of Kansas City, where you're in between your fear of the urbane and your fear of like the big city, and then you've got your fear of the undeveloped country
Yeah.
just on the other side, and you're in this weird netherworld in between, the big brash violence of the city, which you're told as a kid doesn't. Then you end up living in the city as an adult, and you're like, oh, okay. And then there's the country, the like, there's places where people don't even know what's behind a tree out there. All of that, I think, shapes this like culture in which we as young people were looking for like something else, looking for. And I'm not saying that I was necessarily looking for the answers to life in the pages of a Tomb of Dracula comic book, but I will say that a lot of the stuff that was, either shoved under the bed or spoken of in whisper, that haunts you as a kid, it's so intriguing and you're so fascinated and you want to know. So you go there. I mean, people will theorize and teach lectures for, until there aren't universities anymore, about why a film like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is so important. But I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, and us being of a similar generation, I grew up in the burbs in Central Florida around Orlando area, and was raised Catholic. And thankfully, my parents weren't hardcore hellfire and brimstone, but it was present to some degree. So in the 80s, it was, yeah, we had the Cold War, we had Reaganomics, there were the milk carton kids, and the sort of the fear of being abducted around every corner. And and the Satanic Panic was still going strong. So
Huge, huge.
D&D and
I
heavy
was
metal,
raised
right?
under the thumb of the Satanic Panic. I was in a youth group that literally brought in a local detective from the Kansas, the Shawnee, I think, Kansas Police Force or Lenexa Police Department that had a whole department on occult research or something. And it's like they were convinced that there were abductions, mutilations, rituals
Yeah.
happening out in the woods. Where, as we all know, sadly, in retrospect, a lot of that misguided anger, ended up coming down wrongfully on the heads of kids that got into rock and roll or wearing makeup, and unfortunately, and who knows how much of this was by design, how much of it was just by the folly of mankind's, superstitions. But there was, for way too long, as we all know, there wasn't an eye put on the den of wolves ended up being the place that was pointing its finger at everybody anyway. I mean, there was nowhere where there was rampant child abuse like there was in the place that was accusing everybody else of it.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll tell you, David, like for me, the area that I grew up in, there was a town called Casadega, kind of, it was probably about an hour away, maybe 40 minutes away from where I lived. And it was a spiritualist encampment established there in the, I believe, the late 1800s, maybe even something like 1870. And, spiritualist movement, it's not a big scary thing, but the reputation of this town was, oh, it's the devil's town. It's a town full of witches. It was a place. So, sadly, I was raised believing that this is the devil's den there, instead of a place where people just kind of wanted to practice their own spiritual beliefs. So it was the rock and roll kids that were stigmatized, but it was also the people that had any belief system outside of the mainstream. And then,
Otherness is so
yeah, otherness.
terrifying to people who've bought into the lock and step of the way that they're told it's supposed to all work, right? As soon as the otherness creeps in, it's terrifying to people. And that's what the thing that's so beautiful about monsters, is that they represent, I believe 99% of the time, the fears that we have of our own selves. It's something about the werewolf myth that's so powerful and why it continues to feel relevant in storytelling, and so many other of the, the monsters that we look at and fear. But like, what is it that's in ourselves that we're so scared of, and we project that? Now, in its archetypal sense, as modern myth goes, it's awesome to write stories about the werewolf, the reincarnated dead thing that's now walking again, the vampire, etc. But like, you see it, people's fear of the other, people's way of manipulating, truth and othering others, and also maintaining power, fact bending. It's all happening. It's still happening. It's crazy.
Well, the vampires, I mean, werewolves definitely, there's allegory there for addiction. And then vampires, traditionally, and I think the reason why we keep going back to, I'm not saying anything brainy here, people have said this many times, but it's not an original statement, but we keep going back to that genre or to that monster, because a vampire can represent whatever other or whatever cultural fear we have, whether it's fear of homosexuals, anti-Semitism, whether it's representing xenophobia, the invading creature,
Yes.
it can
Yes.
all, or the vampire is such a good monster for applying whatever fears we might have. But let me ask you, so I remember I found some comfort in the old movies that I was watching in my late night creature features as a kid. Yes, I was kind of sneaking around the corner and watching the burgeoning slasher genre, but the old Universal monsters, the William Castle movies, those were things that I kind of found comfort in, to the point that when I was a scared little kid, I kind of imagined Frankenstein's monster as, look, okay, he's real, he's out there, but he doesn't mean me any harm. Like, there was some comfort in it. What about you? Were you a scared kid? Were those movies scary to you, or did they provide comfort when you're watching them late at night?
I mean, how fun was to me that line. There was that line where
Yeah.
I had a deep, like the first real horror film that I can recall watching, like sitting down and watching. I was very young, and I had snuck down because I wasn't allowed at a young age to watch like the Friday Nightmare, but I would see the little tag ads during the week. A lot of times they'd play little teasers during
Mhm.
like after school cartoons for on the channel in Kansas City that would play the show on Friday night. So I snuck down and watched. Was desperate to watch it. I was obsessed even at that age with like this stuff. And watching Curse of the Werewolf, I was heartbroken for him. I
Yeah.
remember being very sad, but also I was terrified of him. I felt something maybe kindred, I don't know, connection to it. So I had a great deal of empathy. Frankenstein, I mean, I was crying. Like, I remember so much empathy for Frankenstein, but also I would have nightmares about Frankenstein, like being in my attic, and that his unknown strength was going to harm me in some way. Like, so it was both. It was really both of the things, and it's what struck such a chord with me when I fell into the magical realm of the imagination of Emile Ferris, and the way that she is talked about at length. Monsters, and I mean, so many
Mhm.
great writers have touched on this stuff. I just bring her up in particular because if anybody's watching and doesn't know her work yet, you should run and get a copy of My Favorite Thing Is Monsters. It's such an achievement in art and comics and writing, but like, I feel the urge to protect and to heal. And I'm a recovering addict. I have 20 years in May of sobriety. I'll be clean and sober May 10th for 20 years.
Incredible.
And that addiction and my mental illness, which nearly killed me when I was in the throes of both my addiction and untreated mental illness, on the surface, gave me both the appearance and the behavior of a monster, for lack of a better term. And I know that, the redemptive quality within is a lot of times the hairy, scary, drooling, bug eyed beast of which we fear is actually something quite, there could be something quite potentially wonderful, who knows, within that. And a lot of times it's the really well manicured
Yeah.
guy sitting behind a desk somewhere that we have to be terrified of.
Well, that's yeah, it's fascinating that those a lot of the monsters that I grew up loving, whether it's Creature from the Black Lagoon or
Oh,
Frankenstein's monster or some of the vampires, like they were dealing with an affliction, but meanwhile, House on Haunted Hill is just Vincent Price as a mean bastard that wants to, like commit murder. So it's
yeah,
the humans, the
give people a
mortals.
heart attack. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
God, I
uh,
love that movie.
Talk a little bit about Count Crowley, Jerri Bartman. This character, this protagonist from the comic. Who is she? As far as where did she spring forth out of your gray matter? What is the origin of Jerry?
Sure. So going back to my origins in Kansas and Kansas City, and falling in love with comic books and horror films, and then the magical marriage of horror comics. Oh my God, I was just like, there couldn't have been anything better to me than horror comics. And I had the treat of growing up under a weekly entertainment of this incredible woman, Roberta
Crematia.
Solomon, who played Crematia. Yes, she was one of my first crushes, if not probably my first crush, and also my the person who indoctrinated me into horror. But I guess around the time that I saw The Lost Boys, which I probably was in like maybe fifth grade, I think.
Mm,
And there were the Frog Brothers who were getting a lot of their cover was working in a comic shop, and they were like looking at comic books to get a lot of their research. And then obviously Roddy McDowell in Fright Night, and the idea that you would show up at a horror host's thinking that they might know how you'd kill. So I think all those seeds were planted early on, and then my love affair with the American, uh, 1960s, 70s horror host culture took over. And I started thinking about how cool would it be if we found out that one of these horror hosts, because it's always jokes and yucks and mostly fun.
Right.
They rarely are do you get a horror host who takes it very seriously, which is fine because I think that's actually healthy for the audience because it's a helpful way to remind you like you're safe, kid. Because
Yeah.
they're for all ages, but I really think they're great gateways for kids to go. It's okay. I'm
La-
here. We can joke. We can laugh.
laugh at the monster. Yeah.
Yeah, and at ourselves. And I thought, how cool would it be if what if one of them out there though was seriously like an actual like genius cryptozoologist who knew a lot about stuff that was going on behind the scenes, and this was their cover, and they were trained in the ways of stopping the threat of monsters that have been working under like maybe demonic leadership for thousands of years, blah blah blah. So the idea is growing and it's growing, and then I'm growing up and I'm getting older and I'm you know doing a lot of drugs and going on all kinds of crazy adventures and studying the art of storytelling. And then I crashed into, nearly losing my life with the demons that we already talked about, addiction and depression and mania. And I got help and I started to build a life for myself. And I started to look around me at a world in which my definition of monsters was shifting, and I saw the power in which media had and the power of calling facts and evidence fake and starting to really twist and bend people's minds with the manipulation of information, even and we're seeing it right now. Peer reviewed
Yeah.
scientific data can be twisted with one powerful voice on a podcast. It can just the whole conversation chafes, and there's no getting it back. It seems like really crazy. So I would say around 2016, I got very passionate about what this story meant to me. But I always imagined it was Jerri with a Y, and I saw myself as like a weatherman or an aspiring news anchor who wants to really investigate, and then the addiction and alcoholism undermines the career, and he becomes the horror host, and then the story kind of falls the way that it does in the comic as it exists today. But I had a series of conversations with several women very close to me that were recounting stories of times in which they had had kind of horrific things happen to them and they just basically hadn't been believed. And I thought, imagine how frustrating that was for me as an addict when I started to actually get my stuff together and started to live a good life when I still wasn't being believed by people because of my history as an addict. Imagine a woman that's not being believed just because she's a woman. And imagine if she's an addict on top of that. So then Jerri became Jerri with an I. And then I really got it. And I knew what I was going to write about. And going into 2016, I just was able to present the idea and get the support that I needed to create this comic that I love. I love writing. I'm so glad people have gotten it.
Yeah. And with Jerri, as a character, she's definitely flawed, but she deals with real life monstrous humans and then monsters of the supernatural variety. With her being an alcoholic, what is sort of the balance? Because there's the comedic element of this book as well, and then there's some darker elements. What's the balance in using that alcoholism as a narrative device without playing it for jokes too much? Is that something that I'm certain that you've thought about? So tell me a little bit about that.
It's hard. I take a lot of responsibility with it, and I think it is for anyone who's taken the journey of recovery. There is this really slippery moment that you get into as you start to really do what you're supposed to be doing, where you've been told if you could just do the right thing, if you could do what you're supposed to do, things will start to come together.
Yeah.
And initially, for me, now, if you could get perspective and step back and look at the big picture, yes, that is absolutely true. Over time, you will see the improvement in the quality of your life going like this. But in the beginning, you will, be 10 minutes late to something because you have a very legitimate reason and your sponsor will ride you like you think you're 12 again. You will, forget something that you were supposed to do, and your family is who you've burned so many times in the past because of your addiction will be like questioning you and your intentions, and it's so tempting and easy to go, you know what, F it, I'm going back. So within all of those circumstantial um, narrative kind of scenarios, there is room for what is can be ridiculous, what can be almost on the surface funny, while at the same time being very authentic to the emotional journey that a person has who's trying to be believed. So if we add into that, this woman, Jerri, is trying to convince her brother that she is going to be on the right path, that she's going to start taking care of herself, that she can be relied upon. She's going to try and be there for her family because she wants to protect them. And she yet has this added element of now she might be late to recording an episode because she was killing a zombie. But to protect her brother and her family, she can't tell them that she was killing a zombie, or a Billy, as we call them in Count Crowley. She has to show up with, scratch on her face or a dent in her car and overcome the hurdle of them going, "You're drinking again." So it was perfect for me because that frustration, and I do hope that I want this book to be something everybody can get something out of and everybody enjoys. But I would love it if people who are in recovery or thinking about being in recovery, or if they've tried recovery and it failed, if they were reading it and they were like, "Oh, I know that feeling," and then you see there is purpose in continuing on the path.
And on that note, I actually want to bring up a couple comments here from the audience. Jerri being initially written as a man makes so much sense because she's so real, palpably true. So often that's an approach that brings out the best women characters without the hitch of sitting down to write, quote, female characters.
Thank you. Thank you, Arthur.
And here's another one. Count Crowley is such an important story because you can feel it so personal and human. I think a lot of people can see themselves in Jerri. And also, I'll throw another one up there, Gloopy Co., which I love that name. Jerri is for sure one of my favorite modern comic characters. So it is connecting.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. That means a lot. And thank you, everybody who's tuned in right now. Hi. That makes my heart feel very warm. I'm very, life is hard, man. Life is just hard, even if you got the bills paid and you don't have to worry about how they're getting paid next month, even if you've got, the things that you think you want. But regardless of all the surface stuff, and by the way, most people don't have those things. Most people are still really stressed about how they're going to pay the bills. Most people still don't have the things that they thought that they wanted. On top of all that, life is just hard. It's one head F after the next. And so, Jerri's got to surround herself with people who love and support her, do the stuff she needs to do to take care of herself, and meanwhile, learn how she can stop the onslaught of monsters who are going to try and take over humanity at the same time. But I wouldn't know how to write. I wouldn't know how to write a character any other way. And I'm grateful. I've written when I write women characters, because I have a lot of opinions and theories about gender and the differences between men and women, and how much of it is been told to us, how much of it's actually inherent, how much of it's biological, how much of it's structural. What about this patriarchal kind of system in which we've been building a society since the wanderers started farming? Who knows? But I do know that I think that we are much more similar than we are different. And when I write Jerri, I do try and see myself in her shoes. And then when it comes to the issues that I just don't understand or I can't relate to, luckily my wife is always a few rooms away and I can ask her questions. Or I have a really intensely powerful, amazing network of female artists who happen to be my friends and collaborators. I do a lot of co-writing and co-creating with other creators, and some incredibly insightful women who I am able to, thank God, just send a text when I run into a brick wall about something, and I always get a response back with really good insight to help me continue so I don't lose my momentum when I'm in a writing flow.
And you know, speaking of that network, I mean, your previous work, All Creatures Here Below, which you wrote, and also stars both you and Karen Gillan, someone I absolutely love and think is a great performer and had the fortune of interacting with a lot throughout the years. That came through as well, the ability to write those characters without falling into the you know, the traps that I think sometimes male writers have when they're trying to write the quote unquote female characters.
Thanks, thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, I still can't believe how lucky I am that Karen read All Creatures and just said, I want to do this movie. I got to do this movie, and we got to not only have her for that month in Kansas to make that film. The performance she delivered is so insanely incredible. But I've made a friend for life, and Karen's a fellow horror
Oh yeah.
hound, and she writes. She's one of those people that I can reach out to, and has so much insight when it comes to character. But her passion for horror is exceptional, and I love her so much, man.
Yeah.
She's the best.
She's done incredible things, and yeah, I've nerded out with her talking about The Shining and a couple other things before. But yeah, she is a true blue horror nerd. For Jerry's character, for Count Crowley, I've read the first issue of the next series, going from reluctant to amateur, and
You have?
I have.
Oh, that's
It's
so cool. I didn't know anybody's had that yet. That's really awesome. I did. You know what? That makes me so happy, Aaron. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm excited. You're the first person I have interacted with who has gotten a peek at our next steps forward.
well, except I don't know how much I can say. I didn't.
Yeah. Okay, sure. But did you have fun?
I did. I
Good.
did. And I don't think I'm going to ask a couple questions with
Sure.
some inside knowledge, but not spoiling anything. And then you, as a creator, can go in whatever direction you choose. But I will say, we pick up right pretty much where we leave off at the end of volume 1.
Right where we left off.
Right
Exactly.
where we left off. And in between, so the book came out, the initial series came out in 2019. Now we're a couple years down the road as a creator. Did you already have that story plotted out, or did you have to jump back into the mindset?
No. I had it. We were set to go. By the time the comic started selling really well, it came out in 2019. I think the trade came out in May of 2020, which was rough because that was, the pandemic. But so before the trade had even come out yet, the comic had sold well enough that we'd been greenlit to start making more Count Crowleys. And had written. I've always had a vision for where the story was going, knowing that things will change and morph as more artists give me, the inspiration, and as my experience changes and ideas change. But I definitely had like a very strong vision about where this next arc was going. And so I was deep in the writing process. The week we went into lockdown was the week that I got the call that Dark Horse was just tabling all projects in production. So I had written 3 scripts. I had already seen pencils from Lucas. We were rip roaring ready to go, man. And then everything went on to screeching halt. Now, over the course of the pandemic, I was able to go back in and I think sharpen and make the scripts better because of all the fear I was wrestling with. I was able to imbue new ideas and new fears into this script, especially when you start thinking about the themes of media and how important media is, and information, and planting seeds of doubt into humanity's minds and playing on our fears of one another. But yes, the long answer to your question. I was, and then it just, the brakes got put on it for about a year, and that was very hard for me because I was so excited. I was
Yeah.
so excited to go. I was like, oh man, in another month, 2 months, we're going to San Diego Comic-Con. We'll do something cool for Suicide Squad. I'll get to do a whole thing for the new Count Crowley announcement, and then all of our lives just changed in a really horrifying way.
True. But now we're back on track culturally, and we're going to be getting this issue coming up in March. And as someone said, no spoilers, Aaron. No spoilers. But I will say, in the promo copy for the
Yes.
new issue, it does say it's been about a week that since she's kind of started, and a vampire is on a first class flight to her town. So that said, it seems like Jerri's world is getting bigger.
Complicated. Yes. And for those who've read for volume one, by the end of issue 4, or at the end of the trade, the Billy had sent that cryptic note back to some mysterious folks across the country, and all it said was Count Crowley, and so that was a little flare that attracted the attention of somebody to come and do a little further digging, and that little further digging is going to lead to some real gouging, I would say. Digging, gouging, slashing. Oh man, it's going to get gnarly.
And along with that, we've established in this world that, there's other appointed monster hunters out there. That's a statement. That's not a question, but you could pick it up as a question.
There are, but how many are living still? And who carries the mantle? Who is actually appointed? Who claims to be appointed? Why does it seem that up until this moment in history, there have been no appointed women monster hunters? Or have there? We don't know, and we will have to find out. But Jerri's relationship with her mentor, the best facsimile she can have for a mentor, because he's such a pain in the ass, is Vincent Freitz. And Vincent is as misogynistic as they come, and we're going to get to know so much more about Vincent in the next couple of issues. And a lot of the decisions that he's made and that he makes, it's always bothered me when there's like an old sage mentor about something that just seems to know everything about everything and is right about everything, because it's like, then why didn't you do what?
Yeah.
Why is everything so screwed up now if that was the case? The truth of the matter is, and we don't like looking at things this way because institutionally it feels good to go, the people who are passing down their wisdom to us had all the answers, but they don't, and they didn't, because if they did, we wouldn't be looking at a world that looks like it does in 2022. I guarantee you that. If our, the people who passed the torch on to us really did have all the answers, as much as we want to believe that they did, and we like to look backwards, I think the best way we can honor them, and there's so many people and important people who've come before us, obviously shaped the world in a good way, but if they really had figured it all out, we wouldn't be in the scenarios that we are right now. So it's like honoring them by looking forward, looking further, looking deeper. Otherwise, what's the point? And I think Jerri's relationship with Vincent is going to be hopefully really entertaining for those of us, anybody who's reading, who's like, face that frustration in life. Because right now, as far as we know, Jerri and Vincent, Vincent really is the only person we know who comes from the lineage of the appointed. I mean, who knows where Rich Barnes is right now? That was Count Crowley before Jerri took over.
Right.
Where is that guy? Who else does she have to reach out to? But even Jerri, when Vincent says to her, the only way to do this thing is to do it this way, even Jerri has the insight and the instinct to go, is it? I don't know. So we'll see. But I'm really glad. And you saw Lucas's art. I mean, here, to everybody who's watching right now, Lucas Kettner, the Bernie Wrightson of our generation, has taken his game to the next level on these next issues. I mean, you if you've seen it, you've seen like all that whole the first class journey across. I love the capturing of the world. It's so beautiful, and the monster stuff is I love it.
And I love the EC Comics level the pop-ins of the Vincent Van Gogh or the Friar Fear,
Vincent
I
Van
think.
Gogh was complete. I've created all the other horror host characters. Vincent Van Gogh is all Lucas,
I love that. And
and it is brilliant. Sister Sylvia, I really love. Friar Fear, I've really loved like writing these characters out and giving him, I give him tons of room because he creates so much of what these characters look and feel like. But Vincent Van Gogh, that was all Lucas, and I love it.
And I do love the character of Vincent Frey, as cantankerous and misogynistic as he is, not a role model culturally, but as a character that is just really kind of chewy. He's a really fun one to watch. But there's also this suggestion um, where we're seeing the picture, the photograph of him and Rich Barnes, where he seems less like a nasty old man, and instead like this was his buddy. I hope that we kind of learn a little bit more about the history and the relationship of those two guys, and what that backstory is like. You can take
You
that as you wish, but that's my personal hope as a reader and a fan.
you will. It's a very, I mean, Jerry's predecessor, Rich Barnes, the Count Crowley for the last number of years. And Rich Barnes is who replaced Vincent Freitz on the show. Rich Barnes is crucial, and his story, what happened to him, is crucial to Jerry
Yeah.
understanding and learning a lot about what they're up against, and how to go about defeating it. And again, I look around me, and there is so much that I think that is problematic, dangerous, destructive in the world in which we are living right now in this moment. And there's certain stuff that I just think I need to take head on and
Mhm.
fight like sword to sword. There's also stuff that I look at and I want to I need to believe that there is some way through dialogue, conversation, compassion, healing, that there is some path towards better places. And Jerry, this is all obviously metaphorically really simplified into like, can you, if somebody's a werewolf, is that it? Is that a death
Mhm.
sentence? If somebody's a vampire, is that it? Is that a death sentence? I'll tell you, when people looked at me and said, you're a heroin addict, that's a death sentence. 5% of heroin addicts ever make it out alive. It's hard not to unhear that. Somebody who's a convicted felon, you go, well, that's a death sentence. You're never going to get a good job. You're never going to vote. You're never going to. Our society is very good at that, telling people their limitations and boxing us into the places that it needs us to stay. And I think that, you know, that 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 I'm rooting for Jerry. I'm always going to try and be as honest as I possibly can. And even in confronting stuff when I want things to end more nicely than they will for Jerry, or whatever scenario I'm writing about, whether it's in Count Crowley or any of my other projects that I write in. But but at the end of the day, I am an optimist, and I do believe that there is a world in which we could save all of the good monsters walking on Earth right now, and we could defeat all the bad ones.
Yeah, and I mean that is something that you talk about in the afterword of the collected edition of the book. And it is good, like, I, as much as I love my scary movies, and I like and I will even tune into the really super dark stuff. I'm a softie. I like happy endings, or at least I like knowing that there are heroes out there. And and that's probably maybe more of the Marvel comics or the comic side of things that
Oh
was
no, it's
ingrained
not.
in
It
me.
goes back thousands of years, man. It's from the Bible to Greek myth to Gilgamesh. That is we need that, and it's
Yeah.
important. Life sucks sometimes, and many oftentimes a hero steps foot on the beach at Normandy and gets their brains blown out. It's just the way that 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 science and probability and reality works. That doesn't mean though that we don't push on and still believe in the possibility of the magic of heroism, not hero worship. That's
Yeah.
different. It's like seeing ourselves. I want to write the kinds of heroes like Jerri Bartman. I want people to see themselves in Jerri. I don't want them to look at her and go, well, I could never do that. Now I could never do what Jerri has to do, but I like to think that my better self could. And I again, I just want to entertain people to it. I love the idea of somebody, a grown up, who hasn't been to the comic shop in a while, or somebody who does religiously collect comics, or a 14-year-old that's never gotten a comic before. All these different people sitting with the comic. If it's a paper comic, awesome. If they bought it digitally through, Dark Horse, awesome. But like sitting up at night in bed with the light on, like unable to like contain themselves before turning the page because you just got to see what happens next. Oh, I love that.
Out of the horror hosts that that you've interviewed, because I know you did the mid May monster madness, I think.
Yep.
And also the ones that you grew up with. Who do you think could be a out there right now as an appointed monster hunter? Crematia, Svengoolie, Elvira could have, who could have legit, you think, be taking on monsters?
I think that we so rarely ever see um, my buddy Rich, who is Svengoolie, out of makeup, or even like he's so good. He has this double identity that is so strong, and he lives somewhere in the suburbs of Chicago. Is this very seemingly uh, normal life, I'm sure, when the makeup is off and he's at home. And I could see him going in the basement, and he has like a computer system where he runs operations for monster hunters around the country, or he's tracking the appearances of the Jersey Devil over here, or there's the Chupacabra appearance happened just down there. And oh my God, there's Banshee of the Badlands. We just had an appearance. A Mothman sighting happened, and he's tracking and sending people out. That's who I think. That's who's doing it.
And not to be remiss, but yes, Dr. Fearless could also be, yeah, which I
That
understand.
guy's a creep.
I've
Dr.
never.
Fearless, what a weirdo. I mean, let me tell you, I gotta say, like, what a real, that guy's got an ego the size of, Jersey. He's a complete megalomaniac. But he loves the horror movies. I think there's a rumor, I think it could be confirmed shortly, that Dr. Fearless may have been making some new content, which will be coming out somewhere shortly. I've heard these things, but yeah, he's always crashing my parties, man.
It's and yet, ironically, never in the same room as you.
I will
It's a
say
mystery.
it happened one time, Aaron. It did happen one time. If you go back and watch I think you can watch it. It may not be available anymore, but I had the as you can imagine, you would have been just as honored as I was. I got the honor of hosting the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards last year,
Amazing.
and because of the pandemic, we couldn't shoot it and anywhere. They had to put all the equipment on my front porch. My wife had to set up all the gear, plug it into all these computers so that people elsewhere could be telling us what to do with it. So we shot it in my living room. So I was there, and that creep somehow figured out that we were shooting these awards, and he somehow walked through our back door, crashed my set while I was trying to tape my presentation. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
ne'er do wells, just out and about. The before I let you go, as much as you can say, I'm a big fan of Dracula, and I I was fortunate to actually travel through Transylvania with Bram Stoker's descendant, and I've done a lot of, cool stuff. Yeah. Uh, you're doing you filmed the last voyage of the Demeter, and this year is the 125th anniversary of Bram Stoker's Dracula, as well as the 100th anniversary of Nosferatu. Um, Anything at all that you can say about doing this great story taken from such a small portion of Bram Stoker's book?
Dude, it is. I've read the novel. It's one of my favorite novels. I've read it several times over my life. Every time I've read it, I've said that is a movie. That story, just the journey of the Demeter, is a movie. It's a 20-some day voyage of this ship in which the entire crew faces supernatural mortality in a way that is so horrifying that it, in my mind, always reminded me of what like Ripley and her crew were facing in Alien. You know, I was always like,
Mm-hmm.
can you imagine if you're on a what seems like a simple journey, and one by one people just started disappearing, and all logic starts to get tossed aside, and you're surrounded by people who do happen to be having superstitions or who believe in weird stuff. And so when I found out that somebody was actually making that film, and then I found out that Andre Overdahl was going to be directing it, and I think he's so talented and he's such a great filmmaker, I fought tooth and nail to get to be a part of it. I'm a huge, as I said, I'm a huge fan myself. I'm right up there on my shelf. I've got from the Warren Publishing Company, the dirt from the from Dracula's castle in a coffin necklace. I think the film is going to be incredible. It was a very difficult shoot. We gave blood, sweat, and tears on board that ship, and I think Andre is going to make something that people are going to really freaking love. I think it's going to be really beautiful. And the cast, I mean, it's all about, the way he tells story, and the cast is just so incredible. I'm very excited about that. It was that was a life goal for me.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it as well. And I will say two final questions, but first I just want to throw this up here that when David starts with dude, he's gonna say the realest shit. I love that.
Dude. My buddy John Hogenacker, who is an incredible actor. I'm sure if you know if you don't know that name, you'd know if you saw him. He was incredible on Dope Sick, that was just on Hulu. He was on Jack Reacher or the Amazon show. Anyway, he's
Reacher.
Amazing. But whenever we're talking to each other, we get very serious. We've known each other since we went to Chicago, the DePaul Theater School together. But it's always dude. I know like something serious is coming. So that's an astute observation, but it's true.
I appreciate, and maybe this is being a male of a certain generation, the call and response dude, the dude. You can have an entire conversation of dudes, and
I just got this from Screen Factory yesterday, and I went, dude. I wanted this Blu-ray so bad, and I'm like, dude, yes.
Dude. Before I let you go, actually, were there any creepy neighborhood stories, urban legends from where you grew up? Any very hometown monsters that terrified, haunted young David?
We had a clown legend in my community about a clown that drove an ice cream truck. That he was just a regular guy, but sometimes when he had sights on somebody, he would throw on the makeup, and then like once every year, once every few years, some kid that would have gone missing was attributed to the clown. There were absolutely reports kind of consistently throughout my childhood, because I lived on the edge of undeveloped farmland that went from where I lived all the way south and all the way west to Stoll, Kansas. Stoll supposedly was one of the gates to hell. And it's just a small rural town. I feel so bad for the people that live there because we would all trudge out there, and there was an old church that probably looked so terrifying just because it was at the top of a hill where there was a graveyard, and the building was in disrepair. But if you threw a glass bottle at the wall in the church and it didn't break, supposedly the devil was present. That was a big one. I had my own kind of encounter with both. I've had, things that you wonder looking back, like psychologically, what was my brain working to explain things and rationalize things, or at least navigate things that it didn't, that my emotional brain couldn't. But I had an encounter at one point that I believe could have been extraterrestrial. If you've ever listened to the great Ian Punnett, who does weekend hosting for Coast to Coast, and I wasn't raised. I raised myself, staying up late to listen to Dr. Demento and Coast to Coast. I've been on that show. I've talked about that.
I did not know this. I know Ian, Deacon Ian.
Deacon Ian, man, he is a genius. He is so great. I love his approach to the dialogue, his dialectics, his way of discourse is so healthy and great, and I love him.
I need to go listen to your episode of that. I've been on there with him and with Ian and George and different interview styles, but now I need to go listen to your episode, your extraterrestrial episode.
Poltergeist. That's a long answer to your question, but yes, dude, lots. And I was, again, raised with a lot of fear.
Yeah.
So you're really like, anything that moves in the shadows is a potential, goblin when you're looking for them. It's interesting, but you'll never see them if you're not looking for them. So it's a paradox.
Yeah. Well, there's also so many rituals set up, or so many patterns set up in order to summon forth Bloody Mary or conjure the devil or whatever. So you're almost like, you're guaranteed to never do it because something didn't go quite right. Maybe you said it, 3.5 times instead of 3 times. You didn't turn full
always
circle.
Excuse why it didn't work. And I love your Mothman hat, by the way. My wife and I are big gamers. We've been playing Horrified, which is such a great tabletop board game. I don't know if you've played it ever, but it's so fun. And the original version is all the Universal monsters, but they have a new version which is set in the United States, and Mothman's one of the cryptoids that you're hunting down. It's a blast.
It's a great story, going back to 1966 and 67, but then I was talking about it recently just because it's the 20th anniversary of the Richard Gere Mothman Prophecies movie, which is just super eerie and creepy.
I love that movie, man. I think it's so well done.
It's the best product placement ever of chapstick,
I forgot about that.
I will. I've got to let you go. But somebody does want to know. Oh my gosh! All the questions are coming in now.
That's okay. Here, we got a few more minutes. Yes. Jessica, I want to hear about that.
I need to know about that, and then also who made your shirt.
Oh, Eve, who made my shirt? I should know that. I'm sorry, I don't. Honestly, guys, I think I bought it at like H&M. This was like H&M, right? It's the one with all the like Egyptian hieroglyphs and like Buffalo Exchange.
The good people at Creepy Co. Not that anybody asked, but I'm gonna just shout them out. I don't have any endorsement deal with them, but the good people at Creepy Co.
So it's good to shout people out that I love your shirt.
Thank you.
Oh, they were talking about your shirt, Aaron, not my shirt.
No, they want to know about your shirt, but and I guess since we're on the Count Crowley stuff, what is there any tease that you want to throw out there? And also, if you were going to Dreamcast the live action movie of Count Crowley, who would be in it? See, I guess it's also dangerous because a lot of the people, so
No, it's okay. It's okay because ultimately it's not my decision. When I pray that there's the TV or whatever, however it is, the iteration of Jerry and Count Crowley, I think it would make amazing cinematic storytelling. I would love to see that happen, and I think the energy that an actor like, I've seen Kristen Ritter bring to roles that she's done. I loved her in everything from Jessica Jones to the recent Night Books, which was such a great gateway horror film. I love Karen Gillan for something
Mhm.
like this. I love Margot for something like this. I don't know, man. Dream casting is fun,
Yeah.
but it's never who you think it's going to be. I found in all of my projects, with Animals, the first film I wrote, I was sure I knew what my character Bobby looked and moved and sounded like. And then this incredible actor named Kim Shaw walked in the room, and I was like, oh, we were wrong.
Yeah.
There she is. With All Creatures Here Below, I thought I knew what who Ruby was gonna be, and then Karen Gillan came along, and it became her role. And like with Jerry, I pray it would be a dream to me if some actor read this comic book and then they were like, so if you're watching right now, you call whoever and say, we got to make this a show. I want to be Jerry. Let's make it happen.
Make it happen. And any teases for when Amateur Midnight Monster Hunter #1 hits comic shops March 23rd? Any teases?
You will buy the comic book. You will love the comic book. You will not put it down. You will tell all of your friends and family to buy the comic book. You will see. We pushed. I'm always of the Shakespeare. I love horror that happens just off screen. I don't get me wrong. I just as much like seeing a chainsaw go through someone's chest as the next guy. But with my writing in particular, I really go towards let's keep it just out of eye. But there were some instances with this new story where we went places that pushed the boundaries that we barely were able to get printed. And that's about all I can say.
Okay.
But it's don't nobody call the FCC or whoever now is running the codes.
The Warren
Warner.
yeah.
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 Don't let them come crashing down on us. But yeah, it's shocking what Lucas can still make look beautiful, tragic, terrifying, and just so visceral. I'm really grateful that Dark Horse is so supportive of my vision, and Megan Walker, who edits the book, she just is always there to say yes and like, how can I help make this happen? And when she says no, David, I listen, because dude, they don't do that very often.
Yeah. Well, with that said, it's just been such a pleasure. I'm gonna ask you to hang out backstage for 2 minutes, and I'm gonna come back to you. But David, you're a hell of a guy. I really enjoyed this.
Come on. Let's do this many more times, Aaron. Thank you so much. I love this, and I love that I am one of you, and that you are one of me, and we are one of us.
All right, thank you, and I'll talk to you in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. Thank you so much, David. And guys, that was such a delightful conversation with clearly a delightful man. Count Crowley, Amateur Midnight Monster Hunter #1 hits comic shops March 23rd, 2022, but available right now. Right now. You don't have to wait for March 23rd. You can go get the collected edition Count Crowley Reluctant Midnight Monster Hunter. It is worth your pennies and dimes to do so. And thank you guys for joining. Please give me a shout. Wherever you use the social medias, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Patreon. I'm all over the place at Aaron Sagers. Also, you can check out more videos like this at youtube.com/Den of Geek US and download Talking Strange every week on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We've got some cool episodes coming up, such as with Ben Hansen. We're going to be talking about UFO abductions. And also, as I said, Dacre Stoker, the descendant of Bram Stoker. We're going to be talking soon about 125 years of Dracula. Wherever you guys are, be safe, stay spooky, and keep it weird.